Welcome to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. I'm your host, Molly Watts. If you want to change your drinking habits and create a peaceful relationship with alcohol, you're in the right place. This podcast explores the strategies I use to overcome a lifetime of family alcohol abuse, more than 30 years of anxiety and worry about my own drinking, and what felt like an unbreakable daily drinking habit. Becoming an alcohol minimalist means removing excess alcohol from your life so it doesn't remove you from life. It means being able to take alcohol or leave it without feeling deprived. It means to live peacefully, being able to enjoy a glass of wine without feeling guilty and without needing to finish the bottle. With science on our side, we'll shatter your past patterns and eliminate your excuses. Changing your relationship with alcohol is possible. I'm here to help you do it. Let's start now. Well, hello and welcome or welcome back to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast with me, your host, Molly Watts, coming to you from, it is a wintry, chilly, frosty, very cold Oregon right now. Cold for us. I'm sure you out on the East Coast of the United States or in other more northern spots, even Alaska, would probably consider it still pretty temperate around here, but we're in the low 20s. It's frosty every morning. There's freeze effects in place. And of course, we're getting no precipitation. So there's no snow on my horizon, which would be super fun, in my opinion. But it's dry and cold and a little windy and just brr here in Oregon. Hey, how are you doing? Welcome to January 20th, if you are listening to this in real time. And oh my goodness, we are now 2/3 of the way through a more dry January or dryish January or dryuary, however you are doing it. And I guarantee you that today's episode is something that you have probably considered this month, especially if you aren't usually taking an extended break from alcohol or incorporating many more alcohol-free days into your life. And so let's talk about what the differences are and are they the key to actually changing your relationship with alcohol. I am talking about willpower and self-discipline. And while they are often used interchangeably, these two concepts are actually not the same. And understanding the difference might make the difference when it comes to you actually drinking less. So let's talk about self-discipline first. Self-discipline, the definition that I like, self-discipline is the ability to make yourself do things you know you should do, even when you don't want to. I talk about this sometimes with folks. It's showing up and doing the work when you want to do it the least. It's not when you're making a plan in the morning, but it's actually implementing the plan in the evening when you really don't want to. And if you've ever felt like you also just need more willpower to drink less, then these are the conversations, and I want to show you why. Self-discipline, willpower, they're all a part of creating lasting change. And you sort of need a little bit of both, but you can't rely on either one of them without changing some of those beliefs that you have about alcohol, which we talked about last week. If you haven't gone and listened to that one, go back and listen to changing your belief system around alcohol. So let's talk about the difference between willpower and self-discipline. Willpower is really reactive. It is the ability to resist short-term temptation in the moment. So you rely on willpower when you are trying to say no to that dessert or, an extra drink at a party sometimes. And that's the reason that, and we'll talk more about willpower, but that's what it is. It's resistance. Okay. It's in that moment. That's what I consider to be willpower. It's reactive. Self-discipline, on the other hand, is proactive. And it's persistent. It's the ability to make yourself do things you know you should do, even when you don't want to. And whether that's saying no to a drink or following through on a plan to skip alcohol during the weeknights, that is what self-discipline is. It's about proactively considering what you want to do and continuing to do it. Continuing to do it being the key. Think of it this way. Willpower helps you avoid temptation when it's right in front of you. Self-discipline helps you stick to your goals consistently, even when the desire to drink feels strong. But self-discipline isn't about perfection or about being strong. It's really about practicing intentional choices that align with your values and your long-term goals, even when it feels hard in the moment. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, or read my book, you know that I used to think that I was someone that lacked self-discipline. I even wrote that in my book. That was a general belief system that I had, that I lacked self-discipline. And I used evidence from my past to show myself and prove to myself all the time that I couldn't consistently do something over time, that I never stuck to things. I'm a great idea person. I start strong, but I never finish. And I had this idea that it was because I lacked self-discipline. Now, I want you to understand something. Self-discipline is a skill, and it is something that you can build, and it's something that I built over time and have continued to build, and I continue to do it. And I can see now that the problem was that I used every opportunity when things didn't go to plan, when I stumbled, as an excuse to give up and throw in the towel. That was just my MO. Now I don't allow my missteps to derail me from going right back in and taking consistent action. And that's really what self-discipline is all about. The thing is that willpower, because we all depend on willpower, especially initially when we're just trying to make these decisions in the beginning. The problem with willpower alone is that it's limited. And without self-discipline, willpower will not last. Studies have shown that willpower is kind of like a muscle. It gets tired, and the more you use it, the more fatigued it becomes. That's why resisting temptation feels really hard at the end of a long and stressful day. And drinking habits, of course, a habit like mine, a daily drinking habit, and like many of you, often involve automatic behaviors, right? And whether it's drinking at the end of the workday or if it's at a social event, habits like these are driven by deeply ingrained patterns in our brain, in our subconscious, in our unconscious areas of our brain, and they are not conscious decisions. And so that's why willpower might help you say no once or twice, but it doesn't address the root cause of those drinking habits. And really, that's where self-discipline comes in. It bridges the gap between knowing what you should do and actually doing it even when it's uncomfortable. I've talked before about how my automatic drinking habit, my drinking habit was a daily drinking habit. And I've shared the story about when I first really understood the power of my own thinking. And it's the power of that intentional, conscious thinking, understanding how my thoughts drove my desire, how I was actually able to break that cycle and not have to rely on willpower was because I started to question my own belief system and started to change the sentences in my brain. I didn't just allow "I need a drink" to stand alone and go unchallenged. I started to say to myself, no, you don't need one. You want one. There's a difference. And the only reason you want one is because what you have believed it's doing for you. And that's not even true. Because I believed that it was helping me relax and unwind, which it actually wasn't past the science, that very small therapeutic level. And when you drink regularly and routinely every day, you don't allow your brain to have that normal neurochemistry. So the thing about learning how to drink less and building self-discipline isn't about forcing yourself to be perfect. And that is something that, I don't think I have ever considered myself a perfectionist. I know I am not a perfectionist, but I did have a perfectionist tendency, which was to let anything that was not what I
what I planned to do, if I stepped away from that plan, I looked at it as an opportunity to not have to recommit myself. I used it as an excuse to just stay stuck in my habit patterns. And self-discipline is really about practicing intentional choices that align with your goals and realizing that even when they're uncomfortable, even when they are inconvenient, even when you misstep, that you're going to come right back to it.
Hey there, it's Molly taking a quick break to talk with you about Sunnyside. You all know that Sunnyside is my app of choice and my recommendation for a tool to help you create sustainable change around your drinking. One of the things that I love about Sunnyside is their commitment to improving the user experience, and that has been a constant since I started working with them nearly 3 years ago now. Since June this year, they have added the Android version of their iOS app, so now it's available for Apple users and all Android users. It's the same Sunnyside experience across all of those devices, and it's just another example of their commitment to improving the user experience. Another example would be the fact that now you can set it up for push notifications. So you can take all of the daily texts, the reminders, and put them into a push preference so that you determine how you want to receive the support from Sunnyside. I would love for you to check it out. Go to www.sunnyside.co/Molly to get started with a 15-day free trial today.
Here are some ways that you can work on building that kind of self-discipline. First of all, you really need to be clear about the reasons that you want to drink less. When you are clear about who you are becoming, self-discipline becomes easier. I was saying this in the Facebook group this week. I asked the question, is it easier to drink less during the winter or during the summer? Just curious, true or false? What do people think? For me, instantaneously, my brain wants to tell me that it feels harder during the summer for some reason to me. Here I am doing dry January right now. And in July, I do more dry July. It's not a fully dry month, but I incorporate more alcohol-free days. And then I was saying, honestly, that's my thought. My brain wants to throw out immediately that it's harder in July, but even though I'm including alcohol. But in reality, neither one of them are hard for me anymore. I do remember when they were very hard for me. But that's the thing. Once you become clear about your whys, this is just who I am now. It's a way of life. It's a way of life that I prefer. And it's the way of life it's the way that I want to incorporate alcohol in my life. And I'm very clear about that. And so the health things that I get from it, the energy, the sense of accomplishment, those reasons and a myriad of others, right? I call it a list of many reasons, make them strong and revisit them often. Those reasons help me push through any moments of resistance when I need more willpower, but they also remind me to get right back to it when I step away from my plans. And that's how I've continued to build self-discipline around this. Number two, not just having my whys, but planning ahead for things that I know might challenge the plan I have in place. I'm not going to rely on willpower in the moment. I'm going to use self-discipline to plan ahead. For example, I'm going to decide ahead what I'm going to do if I have a really hard day at work, right? I know that having a really hard day at work is not an excuse for me to come home and have a drink. It does not mean that that's going to be the way that I answer that. I need to have a plan in place for how to take care of myself and what I'm going to do to feel less stressed out. Another opportunity for planning ahead would be when I go to a party or an event. I'm going to look for and think about a non-alcoholic drink that I want to take with me, or I'm going to check to see if they have some. I was, again, sharing this with actually on a group coaching call. I love how ever present dry January has become in society, at least around me. Both the places that I frequent on the weekends, if I go to a bar, both of them have options for non-alcoholic drinks, including my favorite place, our most common place that we go, has Corona NA now. And so that's just so fun and so awesome. And I don't even, I can go and just feel completely like I'm right there and doing whatever I want to do. And I don't miss out on anything. I don't feel like I'm missing out. And it just aligns with my goals. And so I'm super excited about that. And, but planning ahead and knowing what I'm going to do if I am going somewhere and everybody's going to be drinking and it's a day where I'm not including alcohol, I'm going to have a plan in place. And that takes the decision making out of the moment and it makes it easier to follow through on. Number 3 is you got to follow through even when you don't want to. Self-discipline often comes down to this, doing that thing that you are committed to, even when you'd rather not. So back to that stressful day, right? If you've decided not to drink on the weeknights and a stressful day makes you want to break that commitment, remind yourself of your bigger goal. The discomfort of saying no will pass. But the pride in sticking to your goals and the pride of accomplishment and how you feel after taking an extended break will last. And that's important. So remember that, especially if you're right now, it's on the 20th and you're starting to, your resolve is starting to waver for the end of the month. I really want you to think about and follow through, even though it feels maybe a little uncomfortable for you. Number 4, practice small acts of self-discipline. Self-discipline, again, kind of like willpower, strengthens when you practice it, right? So I always talk about meeting yourself where you're at, small steps leading to big wins. Start small. Commit to just one alcohol-free night a week. Don't try to do the whole week if that's not where you've been. Replace that one night with something else. Make a commitment to yourself that this is just a non-negotiable. Over time, these small acts, these small steps lead to bigger wins. We meet ourselves where we are at. We look for opportunities for continuous improvement, and we build momentum. Number 5, I've said it before, but anticipate and accept that there will be discomfort. Self-discipline often feels uncomfortable, but that discomfort is temporary, and pushing through it is what strengthens your ability to stick to your goals. Remind yourself, I can do hard things. And this is just a temporary, uncomfortable feeling that will pass. I can do hard things. One of the best things about self-discipline is that it gets easier the more that you practice it. Research shows that people who appear highly self-disciplined often aren't relying on willpower at all. They've created systems and habits that make it easier to stick to their goals. And that's kind of what I was just talking about for me. For example, if you commit to an alcohol-free night every Monday, it might feel hard at first, but after a few weeks, it just becomes a part of your routine. You don't have to rely on willpower anymore. And that's how I have built it over time for myself. I went from incorporating one alcohol-free night a week to a couple of alcohol-free nights a week to then being mostly alcohol-free, which is how I live my life. I am mostly alcohol-free. And that's okay with me. And it's also okay with me that I still include alcohol in my life in a minimal way because I enjoy it when I do. Now, the one thing that is really essential for building self-discipline is that you have to be compassionate and curious with yourself when you go off plan. And that's why I created the off plan because it is so important to not get harsh with yourself, not beat yourself up. No one has ever changed anything long-term by beating themselves into submission. When you misstep, instead of beating yourself up, you need to be kind, curious, and ask yourself, what can I learn from this? What can I do differently next time? You have to be willing to reflect with compassion and curiosity. Curiosity being the key. It's not about just understanding what went wrong, but also devising and planning ahead so that when the same situation or a similar situation arises, you're ready to take and let self-discipline guide the way next time. As we wrap up this episode, I really want to encourage you to understand the difference between willpower and self-discipline, and understand that you're going to rely a little bit on willpower to help you in those moments, but by building a skill set of self-discipline, it's really the foundation for lasting change. When you clarify your why, when you plan ahead, when you follow through, when you practice self-compassion, you can build self-discipline, and you can use it to drink less. You can use it to change any habit that doesn't serve you. Now, I would love to hear from you if you are feeling like you are relying on willpower to get through dry January, but you want to learn and you want to really commit to developing more self-discipline with alcohol and using that to change your relationship with alcohol for the rest of your life, then I would love to have you learn more about how I work with people, or come join us over in the Alcohol Minimalist Facebook group. It's a great group, and it's there, and it's a free resource, lots of support. If you have not picked it up already, you can find the podcast listening guide, which gives you a very clear way to dive into my episodes. It's guide.mollywatts.com. It's guide.mollywatts.com. You can pick up the podcast listening guide, and it will give you a roadmap to really starting with the podcast, especially if you're just found it during this dry January time. All right, my friends, keep going strong. You've got the end of Dryuary is in sight. I've got a great episode next week about that final Friday. Did you realize there are 5 Fridays in dry January? I did. I just figured it out this like last week, and I was like, oh, okay. Because my first thought was, do I have to do all 31 days? That was exactly what my brain threw out there. Isn't that amazing that that is what my brain wanted to offer me? We're going to talk about that next week on the podcast. I will see you on Think Thursday. Until next time, here's to drinking less, living more intentionally, living with some self-discipline, and as always, choose peace, my friends.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. Take something you learned from this week's episode and put it into action. Changing your drinking habits and creating a peaceful relationship with alcohol is 100% possible. You can stop worrying, stop feeling guilty about overdrinking, and become someone who desires alcohol less. I work with people in 3 ways. You can learn about them over at www.mollywatts.com/workwithme. Or better yet, reach out to me directly. It's molly@mollywatts.com. We'll jump on a call and discuss what's best for you. This podcast is really just the beginning of our conversation. Let's keep it going.